You're watching Cricket World TV Hotspot. It's time for another county cricket hotspot with me, John Pennington, and I'm joined once again by Matt Carter. Hello, Matt.
Hiya, how you doing? You alright?
Very well, thank you very much. And this week's county cricket very much hampered by rain, wasn't it? There weren't an awful lot of results around.
Yeah, once again, the elements aren't doing us a great hand at the minute. There was only two results, I think, one in each division. In Division 2, I think we've only had two results in 3 weeks, which is a little bit grim. There are a few flat pitches around, so we weren't bailed out this week by the spicy wickets we had last week. So it was a frustrating week all round, really, for everyone, I think, apart from the two sides who did manage to get those positive results.
Absolutely. So let's look back on some of those games, Matt, some of the real key talking points before we look ahead to this week's games. And again, the weather forecast isn't too great. Let's start with the results, shall we? The one in the first, Warwickshire beating Middlesex by an innings and 47 runs. I know we spoke about this game last week as being a battle between two teams who were maybe going to be missing a few players to international duty, but Warwickshire really dominated, didn't they?
Yeah, Warwickshire. I mean, after a stuttering start, I mean, they've really started to get going now, Warwickshire. They're starting to really like title challenges, and it was a strange game. You looked to Warwickshire just batting on it without Ian Bell, and you worried for them. I think of the 11 that started, only one of them has scored a half century this season. And they shot out Middlesex, as they have been shooting out most sides, Warwickshire, but then they slipped 142 for 6, and we thought, oh, they're not going to take advantage again. And then Tim Ambrose, I think, scored only his third century since 2009. And then Jeetan Patel, who is somewhat of a hero really at Warwickshire, is a little bit unheralded. He scored his second first-class century for the county. He'd never scored one before he came here. And they put on a silly amount of runs really for the partnership. And then Chris Wright added a 50 down the order, and pretty much that 460 took the game away from Middlesex, who, again, it was a case of when Sam Robson and Chris Rogers don't score hundreds, Middlesex do tend to lose. It was another situation for them. I think in the second innings, Rogers and Robson got them to 150 for 1, with only the night watchman getting dismissed. And then once they got out, they subsided to 250, and that is the problem for them. If they are going to mount a title challenge, they need the likes of Milan and Denley to step up. I mean, you look at their averages, and Milan is probably the third best after Rogers and Robson. He's only averaging 25, which isn't enough if they are going to make a genuine bid for this title.
And that win, of course, puts Warwickshire on top of the table, and it's ever so tight up there. But they'll be really pleased to obviously be leading the way at this stage.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is really congested up there. I think I was looking at Nottinghamshire. If they can win their game this week, suddenly not so right back in the title picture, and they've had a bit of a sluggish start. But I think for Warwickshire, they've got going now. That they could have really had 3 wins in 3, because they came very close to beating Lancashire as well in a couple of games ago. But they are looking strong. It's just whether that top order can consistently get enough runs once Bell is not available. But Warwickshire's bowling attack is looking as good as anyone's. I think they've got 4 guys in the leading top 20 wicket takers. They do look a very good unit, those 4 bowlers.
They certainly do, and if I'm right, they take on Yorkshire this week, who had a high-scoring draw at Durham, and lots of runs scored up there. Very little chance of a result with weather around as well. But a few problems you've identified for Durham. Also, where's their mojo gone? They're not quite maybe the force that we thought they would be in this early stage of the season.
It's bizarre. I mean, Durham, they haven't taken 20 wickets yet. I mean, you think of Durham, of this team with this excellent seam attack. Any batting lineup who comes against them are going to be in for a fierce test, but they're struggling at the minute. I mean, Onions is taking his wickets for about 36, and I don't know what happened to him Chesley Street this week. It was a really curious situation there. Nobody had scored over 300 of visiting side in about 3 years, and then suddenly Yorkshire go and score 580, and the pitch looked really placid. It was very strange. But on the positive side for Durham, I mean, the batsmen showed a lot of resistance actually when Yorkshire had racked up 500, but it was a really poor pitch, and it was surprising in front of the cameras as well. It wasn't a great advert for county cricket. I mean, Yorkshire had a go, but even for them, they lacked a little bit of bite in their bowling attack. And this is the top 2 from last year, and they've only won 1 game between them in these opening few months. I mean, it is early days, but there'll be a few pondering thoughts, I'd imagine, for both those counties. They do need to get started sooner rather than later, especially Durham without a win in 3. I think it is they will need to get going, but it's whether their bowlers can regain their mojo. Really, that is the big problem for them.
Absolutely, and they go down to they go down to Sussex this week as well. So that's a big test for them as well. Down at Taunton, we had a draw between Somerset and Nottinghamshire. That, I think, is one that I correctly predicted would turn out that way. I suppose Nottinghamshire would probably take more positives out of that than Somerset, because, as you sort of mentioned earlier, they haven't had a great start to the season, but at least they got some runs under their belt this week.
Yeah, they've been struggling for runs, but they did have a good week. Samit Patel scored 100, and he's been in pretty good form for most of the season, and there are a few voices now starting to circulate about him making any possible England return. I'm not 100% sure about that. But Phil Jakes got 100, and then Chris Reed got his highest score since, I think, 2012. So there were positives for them, but just whether they can transfer it. For Somerset, it's frustrating Taunton at the minute. I mean, it did go through a period where it wasn't as flat the last few years. I think 2010, when Somerset were runners-up, I think they won 4 games at home, and the way it's looking this year, I can't see them winning many games at all at home. I think there's been 47 wickets in 2 games with the Yorkshire game as well. I mean, Marcus Trescothick tried his best to mix it up. He put knots in, tried to get something out of the early pitch, and then he declared once they passed 400, tried to get a bit of pressure on knots, but they just couldn't get anything out of it. I mean, they've got a decent seam attack as well, Somerset, but unfortunately they're not going to utilise it like that, and they have made a good start. It's just on that pitch, mounting any sort of genuine challenge for the title, it's going to be very tough when winning your home games at the minute nigh on impossible, really, barring some just abysmal batting is what it's probably going to take.
Absolutely, I suppose maybe they're just going to say we don't want to be in a relegation dogfight again. Whether that's the right attitude is another question. The other game this week, then, Lancashire drawing with Sussex, a game that you'd probably say Lancashire would take more out of than Sussex.
Yeah, I think Lancashire got out of jail on this one. I mean, they'll probably think chasing 320 on the final day, they might have thought they might have got there, but you look at Lancashire's batting records this season, I think 4 times they've been bowled out for under 200. I think their innings average is about 218. So, and against a Sussex attack who have probably been the most ruthless in seam conditions, and Old Trafford is pretty much perfect for that. I wouldn't have imagined Lancashire to get those. I think because Sussex have themselves bowled sides out under 204 times, but for Sussex it was a decent result for them. I guess Michael Yardy hit form, which was a big positive. Chris Nash was back, Luke Wright was back, Stephen McGoffin was in the wickets again, and Lancashire once more needed to be bailed out by the lower order. I mean, Tom Smith again had to chip in with another 40 or 50 odd, and then 19-year-old Alex Davis came in and played well for 50, but they just need more from the top order, Lancashire. I know they've never been a great batting side, and they have always been over-reliant on the bowlers, and at Old Trafford their batsmen won't get as many runs as other counties, but they just need a little bit more just to ensure they're not going to be really, really struggling in a relegation fight.
Okay, now on to Division 2, and the only result this week, Kent beating Surrey by 8 wickets. That went completely against the way that I thought it would. I thought Surrey would kick-start their season, but if anything, it's Kent that have got themselves off to a flyer in the 6th week, if you know what I mean. They've finally got a win under the belts, and perhaps this could be the springboard for them to move up the table a bit. Yeah,
it was a game where both sides were really in need of something just to get them lifted off, really, and I expected a close game, to be honest, but I mean, Surrey were just hammered, really. You look at Kent, and they'd struggled against Leicestershire, lost to Worcestershire, but suddenly things all came together at once. I mean, they'd struggled for batting, anyone making a big innings, and Rob Key and Brendan Nash did that, and then Adam Riley, who's been a bit of a revelation this season. You look in the spinner family, he is one to keep an eye on. I think he took 9 wickets in the game. He's got 14 at 19, which is really impressive. You consider this time of year, and he took Bollinger's taking his wickets at 19 as well. And for Kent, it's a big win. It's the first maximum points win since 2011. I mean, they only won 2 games last year, so it's good to get going early. Whether this is a turning of the corner or just a reflection of how poor Surrey are at the moment. I mean, Surrey they are really struggling. You look at them, they've only won 1 in 20. I think since Chris Adams left, they've only won 1 in 17, so that hasn't really worked, and they're just not getting any individual performances at all, and the season is looking bleak at the minute. They would have fancied a promotion challenge, but it's hard to see that materialising at the minute unless things change drastically.
Yeah, I think if it's going to change drastically, Matt, it's going to have to change drastically very quickly because you've got Worcestershire and Hampshire setting the pace. But that win for Kent puts them up to fifth, so we're not beyond the realms of possibility for them to mount a charge. And they do have a game in hand over the four sides above them as well. So could be one to watch there. Elsewhere, Essex drawing with Leicestershire, and we spoke a lot about how Essex have obviously lost both Parra and Cook to England duty, and missing a few fast bowlers as well. So a decent effort from them to sort of dig in, if you like, and prevent Leicestershire from taking an elusive victory.
Yeah, they've got to take this result, Essex. I think you look at that team and they're absolutely ravaged with injuries. I think without Masters, Topley, Napier, and then Tymon Mills also pulled up as well in Leicestershire's first innings, and then that batting, they're also without Ryan Tendulkar as well, who's obviously playing in the IPL. I think it's with the Knight Riders there.
That's right, yeah.
And yeah, they'll take this result. I mean, you'd probably look at it, Leicestershire at home, you'd fancy that as a winnable game, but considering how depleted they were, and they got in a sticky position as well on a couple of occasions. They did well to pull it out. James Foster, I think effectively in their second innings they were 36 for 4, and then Foster came in and saw off a good 90-odd balls. I think for the second time in the match, actually, Foster did really well. And I know Paul Grayson's been trying to talk him up about England as well this week, which I'm not sure about that one. I mean, obviously he's an excellent keeper, Foster, and he is unlucky not to have more opportunities, but he dragged them through, and Greg Smith finally got some runs as well. So I think certainly for Essex it's a positive result, and it's positive for Leicestershire as well. They keep plugging away. That win's going to come sooner rather than later, you'd imagine. But yeah, positives all around in that one, I'd say.
Yeah, James Foster, for me, undoubtedly, with Chris Reed, probably one of the best glovemen in county cricket, but his chances of an England recall possibly, well, certainly I would think gone now. His time, unfortunately, for him has passed. Probably unfortunate really to come through around the same time that Alex Stewart was still playing, because otherwise I think he would have been probably played a lot more tests than he did.
Yeah, definitely. He probably is the best glovesman in the country, as you say, along with Reed, who himself can probably consider himself a little bit unlucky. And I think with Reed, his batting's developed later in his career rather than earlier, which is frustrating for him. But he's unfortunate, Foster. I mean, you look at these guys as well, more so with Matt Pryor coming through as well. He's been pretty much immense since he's coming until recently. So the door has been pretty closed, unfortunately, for them.
I think from memory, if Foster broke his arm at an inopportune, not as of an opportune moment to break an arm, and I think he was still in the team and he broke his arm, and I would kind of who would have come in after that. I think that didn't help him either, so he sort of lost his place due to injury and never really got back. Final game then that we saw this week, Matt, Glamorgan drawing with Worcestershire, and their great escape is almost becoming a weekly series now. They've done it again.
Yeah, every single week you look at Glamorgan and you think there's no way they're coming back from this one, and then suddenly they pull something out of the fire. I mean, they were never really in this game at all. And then, I mean, Worcestershire got it to the final day, and I think they reduced Glamorgan to about 30-odd for 4, and you thought, there's no way they're getting out of this. They're going to run out of lives here. And then there were 6 down at lunch. You think, a fired up Worcestershire looking for a third straight win with Saeed Ajmal on form, and then suddenly Will Bragg comes in. I think he must have batted for nearly 6 hours for an unbeaten 91. I mean, it was a brilliant effort that from Bragg in the face of Ajmal and Gareth Andrew, and then Mark Wallace, who hit 2 important 50s in that game, and they got away again, Glamorgan. I mean, the top order is really struggling, but they're showing a lot of character, which has got to please them. I think this is their best start for a good few years, and going back to last season, well, they're actually unbeaten in 6, so they're doing well. I mean, for Worcestershire, they'll be frustrated they couldn't get that third straight win. I think had they got that, they'd be really flying on course for promotion. But there were positives for them. I think Gareth Andrews took 20 wickets now. He only took 21 last year, so it's quite some turnaround from him. And then obviously Daryl Mitchell is in sensational form. He is the leading scorer in the country. He wondered without Moeen Ali where the run's going to come from. Well, I mean, Daryl Mitchell's just filling that void perfectly at the minute. He's absolutely flying. And
the result, obviously, Worcestershire will have been disappointed to not win that one, but it does leave them top of the table. They lead by 12 points from Hampshire, so things going reasonably well for them. And of course, they're still unbeaten, so not too shabby down the New Road to their start to the season.
That's right. No, I mean they've got to be positive for where they are. I think a lot of people are predicting a season of struggle for them, but they're just continuing to belittle those expectations, and they're looking good. A lot of young players are picking it up. Ben Cox, and the number of guys who are stepping up is really impressive. I mean, Gareth Andrews he's always been a half decent player, but never really been able to utilise that potential. And this year he's flying, and they've got a couple of young fast bowlers who are doing well, and guys like Alexei Kvetsy's finding form. I think Moeen Ali will be back. Well, actually, they're not playing this week, so they're not going to get him back. But Alex Hales has gone back to Nottinghamshire now. So, but certainly for Worcestershire, I mean, they've got to be delighted with how things are going, even with this minor setback.
Absolutely right. Well, let's look ahead to the next round of fixtures. Then we'll start off in Division 1. We've got Middlesex taking on Lancashire. Obviously, Middlesex, we've spoken about how reliant they are on Chris Rogers and Sam Robson, and then you've got Lancashire, a team also not particularly strong in batting, relying on the likes of Ashwell Prince. Which way do we see this one going, Matt?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I guess it all depends on how Rogers and Robson go, really. You'd imagine if those two fire, Middlesex will probably win the game, and if they don't, it's going to be very, very open. Lancashire won't be with James Anderson, unfortunately. He's one of a few England players who aren't available this week. Middlesex do have Owen Morgan back, which is a positive for them. They need something to bolster that middle order. And then Tim Murtagh, they did miss him actually last time out. He does add that element of control. He's your typical county bowler who you want in your attack. He's a good foil for Steve Finn as well at the other end. But look, I don't think Lancashire have let a side score above 350 yet, so it's going to be interesting how that struggling Middlesex middle order does go against them. And obviously Lancashire's batting is struggling themselves, and Middlesex with Finn the leading wicket taker. You wouldn't imagine a high scoring game. Obviously it depends on the pitch, but Middlesex will have fond memories of that last game at Lords with that famous victory. But it's going to be difficult to call, but Lancashire just needs some runs. I mean, Ashwell Prince, as we said, there's a lot of reliance on him, but since he scored a century in the first game, I don't think Prince has done very much at all, and they'll be hoping that he steps up, and just the rest of the top order. I mean, Josh Butler's back for them. That's a big positive. He did well against Northampton, turned that game for them. So I think it'll be a tight one to call this. Okay,
yeah, I'm with you there, Matt. It could be tight indeed. Chris Rogers in the second innings so far this season, he scored 41, 63 not out, 241 not out, and 82, just underlining his class, and I suppose how crucial he is for Middlesex, particularly when the going gets tough towards the end of these games. You mentioned Northamptonshire there. They face a tricky trip just up the road, I suppose, to Nottinghamshire. I mean, if there's going to be a result anywhere this week, and I think that might even be doubtful because of whether this is probably where I'd go for, because Northamptonshire, they are struggling, and Nottinghamshire just beginning to show some form. I can't really see any way Northamptonshire can win this one. Are you with me with that, or are you going to disagree and stick up for the underdog?
It's going to be incredibly tough for Northamptonshire, isn't it, this one? I mean, but the forecast for this one is absolutely horrendous. I think it's rain every single day. But, so you'd expect the wicket to be a little bit spicy, and Northamptonshire's batting is strong. I mean, David Sales is back. That's a big positive for them. Notts bowlers could do with some wickets, actually. The batsmen filled their boots a bit last week. Peter Siddle, I think, has got 6 wickets for 51, which is a little bit of a surprise. Harry Gurney isn't available either. He's one of those few England players not available. It's going to be tough for Northampton, but they do need to get something sooner rather than later, or they're just going to be completely cut adrift, and it's very hard to come back, especially when wickets get a bit flatter and forcing out wind is a lot tougher. They need something, but it's where it's going to come from at the minute. That's the worry. It's going to be tough. And yeah, like I say, I mean, it's hard to put up a case for Northamptonshire, unfortunately, this one. But Notts' batting has struggled on these surfaces, but then so has Northampton. So I mean, we might only need 2.5 days to get a result in this one. So fingers crossed, the heavens give us that.
I think you could be right there, Matt. On a tangent slightly, David Sales, he would surely make a sort of 11 of players who really, maybe should, if you like, have played a test match. I mean, he's got so many thousands of runs and massive scores, yet perhaps unfortunate again to be playing in an era when the likes of Graham Thorpe and players like that were in the team.
Yeah, he's one of those. He is really unlucky never to have got any England recognition. I mean, I think he's been on a few A tours. I think he went on one about 10 or 15 years ago. He got injured, actually, unfortunately. And that came off the season where he scored an absolute shed load of runs. I think he scored 300 and something like that. But he's a run machine, Sales. He tailed off the last couple of years, but then regained his touch last year. But he's one of these players who can feel himself a little bit unlucky. He's probably up there with your Darren Stevens, people like that, who perhaps deserve some recognition. You wonder if they'd been playing in a different area, they might have got more than a handful of caps, I'd say.
Yeah, we could have some fun with that, really. Vikram Solanki, certainly for me, one of the best players to not to have played a test match. I know he played a lot of one-day cricket, and possibly James Hildreth would be in there as well. Sussex against Durham. Now this, if we're saying a guaranteed sort of hot week, this could be a really, really interesting clash, because you've got obviously the reigning champions against Sussex, who've been doing very, very well. Something else to add to this, on that, they've not drawn any of their previous 7 games. So normally you'd be thinking, well, this should be a result. But again, we've got to just think about the weather, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're in the hands of the weather. The forecast isn't great for this one. I think it's 3 days out of 4 rain. But Sussex's batting lineup is now at full strength, with the exception of Matt Prime. Ed Joyce will be back again this week, so they've got Joyce and Nash back at the top of the order, which is massive for them, because they're probably their best 2 players and most consistent 2 players. I think without Chris Jordan as well, it's difficult to see Sussex rolling Durham over twice in limited amount of time. They will miss him. I mean, it's bizarrely really that Durham's batting has looked so strong this year. Normally the last few years they've struggled to get a batsman averaging anywhere near 40, and then you look at them this year, they've got loads of guys firing. I mean, Jennings, Richardson. Yeah, they're looking really good. Stoneman got 100 as well, but I don't think it's not going to be easy for Durham's bowlers to find form against that Sussex batting on and back at full strength. And I think with the weather, that run of Sussex wins, might just come to an end, unfortunately.
Okay, and finally in Division 1 we've got Yorkshire against Warwickshire up at Headingley. Then this, but the bookmakers can hardly split them. Yorkshire, they do sort of need to get their season going, don't they? And Warwickshire, as you say, are perhaps unlucky not to have won sort of 3 in a row. So would you make Warwickshire favourites for this one, or does home advantage and any other factors give Yorkshire the edge?
I'd possibly just hinge on the side of Warwickshire, I think. But it should be close. I mean, it's going to be possibly a battle of Yorkshire's batsmen versus Warwickshire's bowlers. I think you look at Yorkshire, I think their first innings average is something like 400, something like that. You look at that batting lineup. I think Joe Root's back. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with Andrew Gale this week, whether he will need to drop himself or not. I mean, when he was missing, there was something possibly missing in the field. They did miss his leadership, so I don't know what route they're going to go down, unfortunately. I mean, Adam Lyde is scoring a bucket load of runs, and he might have been the one to go earlier on in the season if they had a choice, so that's going to be intriguing. But I think Warwickshire's bowlers against Yorkshire's batsmen is the key battle there. But Warwickshire will have Ian Bell back, so they'll be bolstered with his return. The weather possibly may win this one, but you never know. I mean, the way Warwickshire bowling sides out, there could be a result. And as I say, that they are absolutely buzzing at the minute, and they do look a very good unit. If they can get a couple of those top order batsmen firing, I mean, Varun Chopra is struggling a little bit. Laurie Evans, if they can get those 2 scoring consistently, then I think they're going to be difficult to stop this season.
Yeah, okay. Division 2 then, we've got 3 games this week. Derbyshire taking on Kent. Kent obviously on a high after their win earlier this week. It's a Derbyshire side who weren't in action this week. So which way do you see this one going, Matt? And you've got obviously a close eye on the weather being in Derby. So are we going to have a draw, or will there be a result here?
The weather's actually not looking too bad at the minute, interestingly. So it really start on time. I mean, it's a bit of an acid test for Kent, isn't it? After last week, we'll see whether that was or how poor Surrey were, or whether Kent really have turned the corner. I mean, they've got some good players, Kent. They are, I think, they're dark horses to possibly get in that promotion mix. You look at, they've got a nice mix of youth and experience as well. You look at Riley with the ball, and then they've got Bell Drummond and a couple of other young players coming through, and then you've got obviously Rob Key and your Stevenses and your Brendan Nashes and your Dougie Bollinger. So there's a nice mix there. Derbyshire need a win, really. They're winless in their opening 3. They fancy their chances of mounting a promotion push, but the problem they've got is, I mean, you've got Wayne Madsen and Shiv Chanderpaul who are always going to score runs, but apart from that, I mean, the rest of them are contributing next to nothing. I think you've got three of your top 6 averaging less than 12, which, I mean, it doesn't matter what the other the other three do. You're not going to win many games like that. It's interesting as well. The last Derbyshire home game, the pitch was relatively flat. You'd hope that there's a little bit more life in this one because Derbyshire seamers they'd want to make the most out of it because that is their big strength. But I think if we get some play, I'd probably hinge on the side of Kent with Derbyshire struggling for confidence, unfortunately. But Derbyshire did win last time the sides met in 2012, and when these sides do meet, it does tend to be fairly close. So it could be a decent game, this one. They are relatively well matched.
You say they won last time in 2012. Derbyshire have actually beaten Kent at home twice in a row. And they haven't beaten them 3 times in a row at home since between 1935 and 1937. So we'll see if they can emulate that record, I suppose. Hampshire against Glamorgan. It's a side second against a side in 4th. Interesting stat with this one, Matt. Hampshire haven't lost a championship match to Glamorgan since 1991. They've won 11 of them and drawn 7. So they, in terms of the history, they certainly hold the edge here. And if there's going to be a result in Division 2, I would say this would be the one where I say put your money on Hampshire, because I just don't think Glamorgan can keep on with this sort of great escape we keep talking about. And Hampshire, they should, to me, be too strong at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see that unbeaten run stopping anytime soon, really, unfortunately. It's got to run out sooner rather than later, this remarkable run of escapology acts from Glamorgan. Their batting just has to do better. You look at and they've got decent players in there as well. You've got your Rudolphs, Allenbys, Goodwins. It's actually been Glamorgan's bowling that's been their best facet, really. I mean, Dean Cosker's taken a remarkable amount of wickets, really, and at this time of the year, I think he's got something like 19 or something. And very much evergreen Dean Cosker at the minute, but Hampshire need to get some results. I think last year Hampshire were badly hit by the weather. They probably drew more games than anyone, and I think this year they've had 3 out of 4 where a couple of those haven't really developed into anything sort of remotely near a game. I don't think 2 out of 3 have definitely not reached the 4th innings, and that is the frustrating thing for them, because on paper Hampshire are very good, but they just don't want to keep getting frustrated by the weather, really.
Absolutely, because they want to push for promotion. They don't want their chances to be hampered by things outside of their control, if you like. The final game then this week is Surrey against Gloucestershire. 2 sides, I say way down. They're obviously Surrey in 7th and Gloucestershire at 8th, struggling a little bit this season. Although Gloucestershire have got a very good recent record away at Surrey, but does that really count for anything? Matt, do you think which way you see this one going? I mean, if ever, to me, this says draw all over it. It's one of the 2 teams that maybe don't have that edge at the moment to finish games off, plus the weather in there as well.
Yeah, they just need something to ignite them, really. Especially Surrey, they just need anything, just a little crumb of inspiration from somewhere. I mean, no one's delivering it at all. You look at the bowlers, no one's took more than 10 wickets, no one's scored more than a single 50. I think Graham Smith is only averaging 25. They could do with him really standing up and leading from the front. They're still without Vikram Solanki, which is a big loss for them. I mean, they're lacking in experience. Look at the average age of their last 11. It was only 24. There's no Stuart Meeker, no Jay Dernmack either for this game upcoming. I think Gloucestershire are without Will Gidman as well, which probably heightens the draw, I'd say. But the Oval's been behaving a little bit more greener this year. Surrey possibly looking to utilise their young seamers. But, you never know with this one, but I think the draw has to be favourite. But Gloucestershire, both these teams' batting lineups are struggling, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility that both could subside and we might see a low-scoring game. I think Gloucestershire, Alex Gidman and Tavare are doing well, but apart from that, it's a little bit like Derbyshire. Nobody else is contributing anything. I mean, Michael Klinger is struggling, which is a bit of a shock to me because he was excellent last year, one of the best overseas players around. I think he's averaging less than 20, and they were looking for him to regain his form and start to lead from the front again.
Yeah, Will Gidman, you mentioned him. He actually averages 64.6 against Surrey, so if he's not available, as you say, that could be a huge loss for Gloucestershire. Right, well, we'll finish off as ever by sort of deciding which games we want to go to, and really this, I think, is you get your weather forecast, you map out, so well, where is the rain least likely to hit where we might see some action? Matt, where would you head off to this week, taking everything into account?
I'm going to take a gamble. I think I'm going to head down south. I'm not fancying this weather up north. I'd probably head to Lords. I think that'll be a decent game. I don't think it'll be massively high scoring, so a result should happen there. And yeah, I'd probably say Lords. See how Josh Butler's getting on. See if Middlesex can bounce back, and whether they can, which Jekyll or Hyde Middlesex side we get, and whether Lancashire can really get their season going.
Yeah, I think I'd go down south as well, mate. I think I'd probably head to Hove, maybe Sussex against Durham. I mean, fingers crossed the weather doesn't impact that one too much, because that to me has all the makings of a good clash. But if it does rain, I'd jump into the car and maybe head off to the edgiest bowl for Hampshire Glamorgan and see if Hampshire can keep that run going that stretches back to 1991. Or of course, if it gets tense on the final day, can Glamorgan escape again? So that's how I sort of do things this week.
Yeah, that would be definitely the place to be on the final day, I'd imagine, with Glamorgan involved.
And I think this week, after these games are finished, we've got the 2020 Blast getting underway. So we're heading into a very busy time for county cricket. It could be very exciting. Again, fingers crossed the weather holds. We don't want sort of 5-6 over games all over the place. That's not really much of a spectacle.
No, definitely. I mean, they have tried to they've been marketing this for the last, I don't know how many months, the T20 Blast. So they've obviously got big hopes for it, the ECB. And I think next Friday it gets going, and it should be good. It should be interesting. But you just got to hope for the weather, really. I think it's a massive factor on attendances for these T20 games. I mean, when you do get the hot weather, then the grounds are packed. I mean, whenever I've been to Derbyshire in the sun, it's packed, and obviously if the weather's a little bit grim, the people do tend to stay away. So unfortunately, we are reliant on the weather. So hopefully it can rain itself out, or it has rained itself out, and then fingers crossed we can get the sun to go with the T20. But yeah, it should be another exciting tournament, this, and obviously predicting who's going to win is nigh and impossible at this stage, unfortunately.
No, we'll come on to that a bit later in the season. I think the move to have a lot of games on Friday nights and to sort of cram it into a bit of a more congested schedule is a good move, because people I've spoken to said, look, when we've had games on Friday night, the atmosphere has been fantastic. People have come out, they've come out after work, start of the weekend, and I think it's spot on as well. If it rains or if it's not great weather, then people are going to stay in and do something else. So fingers crossed the weather holds, and we'll have another great tournament. But that's all in the future. Matt, thank you very much once again for your time this morning, and looking back on the county championship and looking ahead.
No, thank you very much. It's been as good as ever.
And thank you very much for watching us here on Cricket World TV, and I do hope you can join us again next time.